Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Critting Your Role, an actor's guide to role-playing. Sticking with the theme that we've been going with since I started this, last week we talked about something physical. We talked about how to physicalize your emotions and some of the ways that you can play against type. In order to give yourself kind of a unique characterization and things like that. Today, we are going to do something vocally. Now, we've talked about breath support, and we've talked about the actual pitch of your voice and how that can actually modify your character and help you to get into character. Another thing that, to be perfectly honest, I'm fairly certain there is an official terminology for this, and I don't know it. I just call it the location of your voice or where you're speaking from. In singing, I'm a classically trained singer. I took private voice lessons for I think like 5 years, and one of the things I was taught at the collegiate level was these two words in Italian, I believe, which were chiaro and scuro, I think were the words. Again, I'm going back almost a decade to remember this, so I may be remembering it wrong. But they were two different aspects of your voice that you had to have in balance to have a really nice, powerful, clear voice. And chiaro was basically your head voice, the kind of nasal aspect of your voice, whereas as I shift my voice from generally when I speak in my regular chest voice, I feel like my voice itself is centered right back here, right at the back of my not like deep down into my throat, but right about here. That's kind of where I feel that my voice is centered right now. And if I just kind of envision my voice as a little ball, and the center of my voice is this little ball. Right now it's right about in here. Now if I take that ball and I shift it up just a little bit, so now it's all in my my nose, and you can hear it kind of vibrating. And my vocal pitch, it doesn't technically raise, but I sound very nasally, and this tends to come off as kind of whiny or something like that. That would be the chiaro aspect of it. That's where I'm using all of the echoing chambers in my sinuses, which up until recently I haven't been able to use, and things like that. I'm speaking very much through my nose, which is very, very common in French specifically. They actually have a set of vowels that are all nasal vowels. Like the word for one in French is un. It's spelled un, so some people might think it's un if you're traditionally an English speaker. But it is pronounced through your nose. It's pronounced entirely through your nose. And the same thing can happen if you kind of shift your voice down into your chest. So now you feel like your voice is way down here. And well, yes, the pitch of my voice has changed quite a bit. Mostly because I can get really deep like this, or I can get really high like this, but it's still I'm speaking mostly out of my chest here, and sometimes because I'm not using my nose at all, it can make you sound like you have a cold, or I've seen people use this to sound maybe a little bit. Sometimes they use it to sound very intellectual, like, oh, I'm so important, I don't even need to use my nose. And other times it's more of, oh, I'm just a very, very smart kind of person. So again, it's just done by kind of imagining your voice as this ball, and shifting it ever so slightly up and down. Now, one of the things you want to definitely avoid when you're doing this to create new characters and to create new voices and things like that is straining your voice. Again, I'm not talking about stretching your vocal cords and really doing something like this or anything like that. That can be damaging to your voice. And your voice will tell you when you're doing something wrong to it. It'll start to get a little bit scratchy. You may notice that your neck starts to hurt. You may notice that you start feeling just kind of strain around here. Those are all signs that you are extending your voice beyond what it normally is supposed to do. My next series is actually all going to be on warm-ups and things like that, things you can do to help prepare your voice so that you can use it in a lot of different ways. But because I'm talking about something that could potentially damage your voice, I'm trying to make mention right now of just really, really being in tune with what's happening with your voice. So when you balance the chiaro, the head voice, and the scuro, the chest voice together, you get this wonderful, very resonant sound that you see in a lot of opera singers, a lot of trained singers will all have this very balanced sound, because that's actually how your body is designed. It's to, these your sinus cavities are designed to be echo chambers and all this stuff, and they have all these other uses too. But when you use your body the way that it's supposed to be used, it comes up with some pretty impressive feats, such as again, I didn't used to sing a whole lot of opera. What I used to sing when I was taking private voices lessons was they were called I'm gonna call it the wrong word, and you can yell at me later for it. I believe it's called oratorios. Opera was secular. Oratorios were sacred, meaning they were religious based, generally being based on Catholicism, because that was the major religion of the time when they were really, really big. Things like the Messiah is a very famous oratorio that almost everybody has heard a portion of it called the Hallelujah Chorus. You know, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Yeah, that's part of an oratorio, and so it's always sacred based. And things like that. And so one of the oratorios that I learned to sing was actually about the story of Samson. If you're not familiar with the story of Samson, it's a story in the Bible, in the Old Testament, about this man who had great faith in God, and God had chosen to bless him with great strength. He was an incredibly strong man, very similar kind of to like the story of Hercules. And his strength was tied to his hair. God told him, do not cut your hair. As long as you keep your hair long, you will be, you know, the strongest man around. And so as the story goes, there is this woman that seduces him and tries to get the information, and she keeps failing over and over again to figure out how to weaken him, and he eventually goes, well, if you cut my hair, I will lose all my strength. And that's what happens, and the oratorio that I used to sing a part of was called Honor. The song was called Honor and Arms, and it was actually one of the enemy soldiers, one of their champions, was in kind of an arena style area, and Samson's in front of him, and it would be incredibly easy for this champion to strike down Samson because he no longer had his strength, but there was no honor in that. It was you know, it was so easy, and he was so pathetic that it would be a very dishonorable thing for him to just kill this man that couldn't defend himself anymore. So I'm going to sing something I've not sang in a very, very long time, just to give you an idea of what kind of the balance between both of them sounds like when used correctly. So, I have to move the mic away because this is relatively loud. So, honor and arms, scorn such a blow, scorn such a blow. Though I could end thee at a blow, though I could end thee at a blow, though I could end thee at a blow, for victory. And it goes on from there. It's a very long song. But that's kind of a balance when, despite the fact that the pitch itself was relatively low, it's a baritone piece. Again, he's technically a bad guy, so he's allowed to sing low. You guys should have been able to hear, the upper register of the chiaro in there, along with the scuro, the low kind of bass in there, all mixed together. That's the mixture of the two, and if you take one or the other out, it can really change the characters that you're playing. And so just kind of playing with where you position your voice and how much of your head voice you use and how much of your chest voice you use without even getting into what's called falsetto, which is I've always called it the girly voice, which is completely politically incorrect, but it's basically where you start. It's this very, very high register that sopranos in general sing almost entirely in falsetto. Tenors will switch between their what's called their head voice and then their falsetto. We'll talk about falsetto another time. But yeah, really, play a lot with, speaking through your nose or speaking down into your chest. And that can give you a very wide range of characters, and it can really help you, especially since you don't normally speak like that. It can really help you to create a unique character that other players are going to react to. Just again, remember, if your voice starts feeling strained, if it starts getting scratchy or anything like that, that is your voice's way of telling you, hey, you are doing something you really shouldn't be doing. You're pushing me a little bit too far. And at that point, dial it back a little, speak a little softer, maybe, avoid role playing for a little bit, drink tons of water. Water is wonderful for you. Lemon tea with honey is another thing that a lot of vocalists will use. But things like that, treat your voice very, very nicely, and it will give you the ability to do a lot of different things. Anyway, that's all from me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.